Right, wonderful. Thanks, Meg. Okay, so first of all, just a big thank you for all of you for joining us today for this really special conversational webinar celebrating the strengths and the adaptability of Armed Forces children and the support strategies that currently exist within Scottish education. And today's webinar, which is being held purposely during Month of the Military Child, it highlights the commitment and the passion that exists within this community to support these remarkable young people. So we just thought it was a really nice way to kind of end Month of the Military Child, although we should be celebrating military children, Armed Forces children throughout the whole year, as we all are doing. As we know, children from military families face unique circumstances that shape their educational experiences in both really positive ways and challenging ways too. And their experiences help develop distinctive strengths while also creating obstacles that educators and support systems must address. And today we bring together dedicated professionals and practitioners from across Scotland to celebrate achievements, share effective practice, and discuss how we can build upon work already taking place. We're at a key moment for Armed Forces children in Scotland. The implementation of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child represents a significant step forward in recognising and protecting the rights of all children. Furthermore, the recent report published by the Scottish Children's Commissioner on Education in Scotland acknowledges the unique circumstances faced by Armed Forces children, highlighting a need for continued tailored support. Creates further opportunities to enhance support systems and ensure these young people receive the attention and resources they deserve. We also really look forward to the launch of the report around the impact of movement across the UK on special education needs of Armed Forces children from the Centre of Military Research, Education and Public Engagement with Napier University in Edinburgh, and the work produced by SafeSG, so the Scottish Armed Forces Education Support Group, who are leading on work to develop a resource for education to support better transitions across the whole nation. And it's also important to mention the current work being undertaken by Dr. Paul Watson and the Northumbrian Hub and others across the UK on the special determinants of health, social determinants of health and Armed Forces children. And also delighted to share that the Skip Alliance annual conference will be held in Glasgow, not because it's very close to me, no, it's wonderful that they're coming to Glasgow. And again, this is a fantastic opportunity to shine a light on the unique context in Scotland while enabling cross-boundary learning. And we have so much wonderful work being carried out in Scotland, which will help us support children and young people from this community. Last academic year and this year, I have had the privilege to visit schools and meet with various education practitioners across the country to help deliver CPD around Forces Life to staff teams across primary and secondary schools. And I've witnessed firsthand the different approaches being implemented to support service children and their families. The dedication of school leaders, teachers and support staff is making a real difference in the lives of these young people. And of course, it's been wonderful to equally work with the young people themselves, listen to their views and to what next steps need to happen to support them with their educational journey. And I think in highlighting all of this, it's just really important to emphasise the power of partnership when we meet, link, share and learn from each other. And we have access to a range of resources to support children, families and professionals navigating Scottish education. So organisations and web pages, including Forces Children Education, the Military Liaison Group in Highland, the Dandelion Project in Moray, Forces Children Scotland, the family federations across the tri-service community, Reading Force, the Naval Children's Charity, to name a few. And big apologies if I haven't named you, but you're all doing wonderful work. But all these fantastic organisations and resources provide valuable guidance and advocacy. and they all represent vital support for many families and practitioners, offering specialised knowledge, whether it be regards to a specific tri-service community or profession, and they offer practical support tailored to the unique circumstances of armed forces life. So before I introduce the panel, just wanted to start on a big positive note, because there's lots of fantastic things happening at the moment in Scotland. But before I introduce you to the panel, just a little starter activity. Can you pop some of the strengths you've witnessed Armed Forces children displaying in a professional or personal capacity, and any challenges that you have noticed when working in educational settings with Armed Forces children and young people? So if you just want to pop that in the chat, just to get us started off. Thank you. Brilliant. Yeah. Yeah, this is great. Thank you. And it's nice just to leave these reflections in the chat function. Yeah. Okay. Right. That's great. Okay. So before we get started, I just want to first of all introduce you to our panel, who will be sharing their experiences, highlighting successful initiatives and discussing any challenges they've encountered in their work. And each panelist brings unique perspectives and valuable insights that will hopefully enrich our collective understanding and inspire future actions. So first of all, we'll start off with, I'm just looking on my screen, the first person I see. So Lou, would you like to introduce yourself to the participants?
Sure, thank you. It's lovely to be here, and thank you very much for inviting me along. My name's Lou Kinnear and I work for Highland Council. I have the longest job title in the world. I'm Promoting Positive Relationships Coordinator, but really I'm the Armed Forces lead across Highland in relation to Armed Forces families, and I lead the military liaison group education across Highland. So that's from early years through to secondary, and those transitioning into further positive destinations.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Lou. Pri, would you like to introduce yourself and your role?
Hi everybody, it's great to be here. So my name is Chard and I'm the Education Support Officer leading the Dandelion project in Moray. And the Dandelion project, I'm excited to tell you about it more later, but it's a project that supports schools with their children and young people from forces families. So that's working with primary and secondary schools across Moray.
Fabulous, thank you so much. Linda, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Of course, I'm Linda Candlish. I am Deputy Head Teacher at Kilgreen Primary School, which is in Helensburgh, Island Bute, so very close by to Fastlane Naval Base. To really hear from an education perspective in terms of working day to day with the children and supporting their kind of attainment, health and well-being, and work, trying to forge partnerships both with the civilian families and armed forces families.
Yes, thank you. And Robyn, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, hello, I'm Robyn. I'm the Policy and Parliamentary Officer for Forces Children Scotland. So I do a lot of our policy work, meeting a lot with MSPs and trying to amplify the voices of children and young people from this group.
Fabulous, thank you so much. Okay, so to start off,
Yvonne's here. She just can't see her. She's on the second page.
Oh, fab. Oh, Yvonne is here. Wonderful. Yvonne, would you like to
everyone.
introduce? Would you
I
like
know.
to
Yeah,
introduce yourself?
hi everybody. I'm Yvonne Moore. I'm the head teacher at Collington Primary School, which is based in southwest Edinburgh. We're sandwiched right in between two barracks, Redford and Dreghorn. And I started here about 4 years ago, but I've been permanent in the post for 2 years. And our percentage of military families can be, or children can be, as high as 88% since I've been here, and we're currently sitting about 65. So it changes on a daily basis, are coming and going. But yeah, it's lovely to be here, and thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Robyn. Okay, so the first part of our webinar today, we're going to focus in on educational policy in Scotland, just to give a wee bit of an overview before we listen from some more of our panellists about strengths and examples of good practice. So first of all, I'd just like to, Robyn, pose a question to you. What educational support frameworks and policy is currently available to address the unique needs of children from armed forces families, and how are these supports implemented across different local authorities to ensure consistency of educational provision? And are there any challenges to existing policy or frameworks that can be identified?
Yeah, so just to start, apologies if my dog barks. She's right behind me, so I keep looking around and looking at her. She's primed and ready to bark at any time. So, but I'll first off start by talking about the Additional Support for Learning Act in Scotland, and that is quite different to how England kind of manages their own kind of educational needs. In England, you need a diagnosable condition, and it's really focused on that side of additional support for learning, whereas in Scotland it covers quite a wide range of needs for children and young people, and the needs can be long-term or short-term. It can cover things like life events, so the statutory guidance names things such as if children are going through a divorce in the home, bereavement, or being in a forces family is mentioned in the statutory guidance, just because of the sometimes unique needs that can present for children and young people. And again, that won't be all children and young people from forces families that need support at different times, but some will, and it's good that that's highlighted in the statutory guidance. So one of the key challenges that children and young people can face in terms of education is the frequent moves, especially between the different home nations or from abroad back into Scotland, as all education systems are different. And that can be quite confusing and challenging for children and young people. We hear from them that sometimes they have to repeat learning, or they miss whole chunks of learning that they never get to kind of catch up on, which is quite a challenge, especially because the Additional Support for Learning Act should kick in and they should get some support there, but we know that's not always the case. Due to no fault of school's own, there's obviously funding issues, teachers and staff are stretched. And sometimes if they're in a school that's not got a lot of armed forces peoples, that understanding maybe isn't there. And sometimes even if it is a high population, it's still, they might get missed for whatever reason. So some other circumstances that children and young people have told us where they need that extra support, where the Additional Support for Learning that could help, would be times such as transitioning into a new school or transitioning out of their old school. And also if their serving parent is deployed, this can be a time where they can get quite need some emotional support needs met that affects their learning, because it's quite stressful, obviously, that we've heard from children and young people. They don't always get good contact with their parents, or sometimes their parent can be the one that helps them with their learning, but they're deployed, so they kind of miss out on that. So they might need pastoral support or more learning, direct learning support. So that's quite important, and it is a great piece of legislation, but we do find that it differs where you live if you get that kind of support. Sometimes there's places that have more armed forces young people will be able to support it because they understand the needs better, just because they're seeing it more often. So it's quite a postcode lottery for children and young people depending on where they live, which isn't great, but we'd want to see that implemented more fuller across the whole of Scotland, so that there's not that discrepancy across the country. Another piece of legislation that's UK-wide that can help is the Armed Forces Covenant and the Armed Forces Act that was brought into law. So the Armed Forces Covenant is a pledge by the nation to ensure fair treatment of those who serve or have served, but also their families, which is often the part that's forgotten or not realised. So it's a commitment to acknowledge this and understand the sacrifices made by the armed forces community. And the Armed Forces Act that was brought in made the Covenant have due regard in 3 main areas: housing, health and education. So that's why we're talking about it here. So it recognises that because of frequent moves, education can be quite difficult for children and young people. Sorry, my dog's decided to bark. And it looks to address the sacrifices and make it more equitable. It's not about getting special treatment because you're in an armed forces family, but it's about recognising that there is challenges and how can education rise to meet that and make sure that children get the fairest access to education that they can. The implementation across the Covenant has been a challenge. Just recently, the Defence Committee from the House of Commons came out with a report about it, and there was some positives there, but a lot of families didn't understand the Covenant, they didn't know how it applied. But not just that, the people who were meant to be duty bearers and uphold the Covenant also didn't understand that a lot of the time it applied to families, and that includes children and young people's education and housing. So it becomes a bit, again, of a postcode lottery about what kind of support you get. And many families, again, don't know about it, so they can't even use it when they move. And it's important that every local authority understands it and upholds it, because they have all signed to do that. So it'll be interesting to see the next few years with a lot of the legislation going on down in the House of Commons about bringing an Armed Forces Commissioner and kind of strengthening the Covenant and what that will look like for education in Scotland, especially. And just the last bit I'm going to talk about, there's a lot of things that impact education, but the last one I'm going to talk about is the UNCRC Incorporation Act. So that came into play last year, and Scotland incorporated the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child into law. So this means that legislation in the Scottish Parliament must comply with the UNCRC. It's a bit more complicated than that, because if the law was made prior to devolution or has some kind of, it's a UK law that overrides it, then the UNCRC doesn't apply. It is a bit complicated, but generally we look to just try and apply the UNCRC to any kind of law going forward, because it's best to do that and it makes a culture change. So there are 54 articles, but the ones applying mainly to education are Article 28, which is about access to primary and secondary education, and Article 29, which is the right to an education which develops the children's personality, talents and abilities. So this Article 29, I think, is quite important for children from armed forces and veteran families, because when you think about the fact they move around frequently, they have a lot of disruptions to education. It might mean they're not able, they might, again, like I said earlier, they might miss out on parts of their education or their repeated learning, which can, be quite annoying if you're a child. It can put people off in their learning journey. And it also means that they might not be able to pursue the subjects that they wanted to choose, particularly for secondary school education, depending what time of the year they move and things like that. So the frequent moves because of forces life can impact on education in this way, and it means that education that should develop their talents isn't always possible, and their experiences don't always fit into that traditional education model that we see. There's been a lot of talk in Scotland about education and how they want to change the way we do education in Scotland, but we so far are not seeing really much change happening. So it's vital that schools work with families to ensure that they're able to promote this for armed forces children as much as they can within, the confines of everything else going on. We haven't seen the UNCRC law tested in court yet, so it will be interesting to see the impact of that over the next few years and what happens. But again, like I said, we hope the law will bring around a culture change more than anything, with more organisations caring and acting upon children's rights in a positive way.
Thank you so much, Robyn. That was really great just to hear all about the policies within Scottish education. And just, I know you obviously ended by talking about the UNCRC, and I was just wondering, Meg, if you could maybe just highlight from children and young people that you've been recently working with. Forces Children Scotland have been working to develop the Children's Rights Charter, and I believe they mentioned education within the Charter. If you just wanted to share a wee bit about that, I'll just spotlight you.
Yeah, I won't take up too much time. I think there were a couple of really key things that came out, more themes. We'll put a link to the charter in the chat so you can see the fullness of it. But what was really clear from the young people was a level of frustration at times that they're only thought about in relation to their attainment and education, that lots of the chat that goes on is about educational transitions, about impact on attainment, but not necessarily the other transitions they experience, the transitions around friendships, the transitions around hobbies, and things like that. So their first request in the charter was, and they've put it very nicely, my education needs to be about more than my academic achievements. So that was the theme that came out really there to have a think about. There were then some really practical things about making sure transitions timings worked best for them and took them into account, that their information came with them with their new school, but actually they had a say in what information came. Lots of young people having this sense of, yeah, the information came, but it wasn't right and no one ever checked it with me. That bit Robyn's already talked around the extra help when they need it. One of the ones I really liked that young people came up with was talking about schools being assessed in the inspection process about how well they met the needs of forces children. And they did want to say that that shouldn't just apply to schools that had a large number of forces children, but actually if you get it right for forces children, you get it right for all of the young people. And in that, getting it right for every child agenda, that was really important to them. The hobbies and interests came in, and if you look at that broad definition of Article 29 about, an education that promotes their whole being, having a look at what hobbies and how they transfer with them was really important. And the only other one that I'm going to mention, which doesn't necessarily obviously creep into that Article 29, 28 bit, was the debate in Scottish schools just now around use of mobile phones and taking away mobile phone use in school time, that actually for forces children who have a parent deployed, that can be very difficult, particularly if they're in a different time zone, that the only time they're going to be able to speak to a parent is actually during the school day. So just asking for that, all schools not to have a sort of blanket view of those things like mobile phones, but considering individual needs. One of the young people, particularly, well, actually two of the young people were young carers who said losing that mobile phone during the school day, particularly when a parent was deployed, created a lot of mental health and anxiety for them because they didn't know whether or not the person they were caring for needed help, and what that looked like. So just having that think about that broader bit, what can schools do to support children during lengthy separations, and recognizing that that does have an impact on more than just how they're doing in class and learning, but those emotional well-beings, and how do we promote that expectation that is within the UNCRC, that when children are separated from their parents, that everyone does what they can to support that relationship in whatever way they can. So they're the nuts and bolts, but I'm going to pop in the chat the link to the charter so you can have a look.
That's great. Thank you very much, Meg. That's wonderful to hear. We are now going to hear from Yvonne and Linda, who are both working in primary schools. So as we've heard, Linda is Depute Head over in Helensburgh, and Yvonne is representing Edinburgh Council. And I think I will start, Yvonne, with you first, if that's okay. And I'm both going to ask you the same question. So could you just share a bit about your role working with children and young people from armed forces families, particularly the unique strengths and the adaptability you've observed in these children? And can you detail the ways your setting recognises and nurtures these strengths, and what support systems you found most effective in helping them thrive despite the challenges they may face? I'm excited to hear.
I feel like I should probably invite Johnny, who I know is on this call somewhere, because we kind of work really closely together, and we kind of bounce ideas. We're really close proximity, Collington and the Feeder High School, and we also started, I think, on the same day or roundabout. So we both had this opportunity to work with the fabulous families. So I don't think anything. I think I'm learning all the time. I have to say that Lou, that's on, kind of aspire to have what Moray has, and you know, we're doing small steps towards that and tweaking it to suit our setting, because although we have fewer children across Edinburgh, we have many of them just in this one setting. So there's another few schools where children are placed, usually when they come out of the army and they either go into veteran housing or they move into their own accommodation. So I think Johnny and I are a bit of a team, and within that we then also have other support workers helping. And I think the main thing is, for me, is to really take the child as an individual. So one, you know, you might have one family that arrives and it's quite an easy, seamless introduction into school, and it just works. And then for other families, it's really complex, and it can often be weeks and weeks of work to get to a point where the children are ready to start. And I think what I learned very quickly was we can't wait on information to come, because often that takes ages. So as soon as I get information from a family, it's usually the family phoning first to say we've been deployed or we're going to be deployed to your school, we get started. So usually I'll just, you know, try and find out as much as I can from the family, and they're usually really good at telling us a bit about the child, having that trusted kind of chat right away, where, you know, I feel like some parents might not want to give you the full story because they're saying, is there a space? And if I say all of these things, but really making it as comfortable as possible. If they can come and visit, I try to do that, so it's face to face. If not, we'll have a Teams call and try to gather as much information about the child or children coming. And then I'll take the opportunity to phone the school and get as much support from the school about what's been needed to support the child. And sometimes it's just very little. It's just a case of files getting sent and so on. But often there can be lots of learning support, information, lots for additional needs, and even child protection. So I spend a lot of time. I used to designate it. I used to just deal with it as and when it came in. But now I'm trying to be more strategic. Johnny's still just doing his into headship. And I'd recently finished this awful masters that when you're trying to be a head teacher and do this studying at the same time, it was just it was awful. But anyway, one thing I learned was you need to set aside time as a head teacher for strategic planning, because if you don't, you will not ever get to it, because it's just a small school like mine. There's me and a principal teacher, and he has a teaching commitment. So I set aside time, and within that strategic time, I put aside time for our armed forces. So it could be that I'm getting in touch with Army Welfare. It could be some of the charities I work alongside, and each week or month I'm getting to know more and more. It was a fabulous event on Friday that I was invited to for the children's rights. I made 2 wonderful connections at the table I was sitting at, and already one of, I think, the call, is that right, as well? And she just managed to help me with some funding that I had been looking for a long time, and from sitting next to her I was able to. So today that's all in place for this family. So I'm learning more and more as I go. So I suppose that when the children do arrive, it's about, for us, it's social and emotional to begin with, nothing to do with their learning. If they come in and they settle into learning in the class, that's fine, but we tend to work on buddy systems. So we'll have a few identified children within the class who are going to be buddies, and I try to mix it up so that there's a range of people, so both civilian and military, because often it could be that the person that they gel with is about to move on as well. So I try to get a wee range of people that they'll be buddying with. The children get a pack when they come, and the parents also get a pack. And our website is dreadful at the moment, but come August, if you had a look then, it's going to be modernised and updated, and there'll be a tab for armed forces. And I'm kind of pinching a lot of the things, or magpieing from Lou and other websites that I've found, so that everything will be there to support families as they arrive and join us. Once the children have settled in, they'll have usually about 10 days after I've put as soon as they come, I put a diary entry into my diary to then phone the parents and just have a check-in. I'll invite them in if they just want a quick call, just to, how are things? Did you navigate uniform? Are you onto Teams? Are you managing the parent pay? All these things, rather than having to wait for them to come, because I don't think historically parents do come in regularly to ask these small questions. They just try and get on with it. And I really wanted my project for Into Headship was parental engagement with an armed forces focus, really, because I couldn't believe just how little they asked for things, having come from a different setting previously where parents were in at me all the time. So we've worked really hard with that. We've got representation in all our classes as class reps, and many of them are Armed Forces mums. They are all mums at the moment, but we're hoping for a few dads at times. We've got a parent council where it's 50-50 now for Armed Forces parents on that parent council. There were 0 when we first started to try and put that in place. So, you know, we've worked really, really hard at quite simple things. Nothing here other schools won't have tried, and if anything, there's probably better ideas out there. But it's just about relationships. The first and the most important thing for me is relationships, to be able to kind of make someone feel at ease so that I'm approachable, and if it's not me, one of the members of staff. And once all that is in place, and we feel that if we've had to have child planning meetings, they are prioritised. We always keep a bit of space with our educational psychologist, because if we fill her up with her workload, you know, in August, and then other children arrive as the year goes on, then that's you know, you've got to wait for another whatever August before she'll take on. So we always have a bit of space there, which is great, and she is really good at working with us for that. And then we have a really strong sport learning team, and then at that point, once the children are settled in, it can be 3 weeks, it can be 10 days, or it could even be sort of 6 weeks, just depends on the child. We'll do a baseline assessment, because as someone else was saying, who was before me, I've forgotten their name, sorry. Robyn, as you were saying before, sorry, Robyn. You know, I think that it's really important to kind of get it right for the kids. I don't want someone coming in and doing the Romans again because they've done them in the last class and the class before. So we're really kind of, we look at the bundles of the curriculum for excellence, but we don't have set topics. So we'll plan around the class in front of us. And we've been doing that really successfully for the last couple of years. And at that point, once we have a baseline for the child, we can start tracking them, because in Scottish education, as you all know, we track over P1, P4, P7. We hardly have any children from our military families that start in P1 and remain with us from P7. So we have to have further tracking and monitoring of these children more regularly. So we'll have regular meetings 4 times a year with the staff, but every Thursday with Sport for Learning teacher, where we're kind of, if we put an intervention in, we're tracking and seeing. And with some of the money that Johnny successfully bid for with the Covenant, we put in, our principal teacher had some time out of class to work to fill, I never like saying, I think Scottish Government, you know, to say you'll close the gap. You're never going to close the gap, but you can definitely narrow it. And we try to work with, David will take groups. So if from our baseline, if things have been identified that children have either missed or they just haven't covered, but our children have, then he'll work, it can be 4 times a week, it can be twice a week, small groups if that's the best economical way to work, but it can be one-to-one to try and get children. And we do a lot of home learning, individual home learning. So these children may not be doing the same home learning as the rest of the class, because what they might need is more specific and bespoke. So we work with that, and as I say, I don't feel there's anything specific. We have, we don't, you know, sort of say we've got coffee mornings for our Armed Forces families. We tend now, because we've got such good relations with all our families, we tend to have regular coffee mornings where everyone's invited along, and we'll have top speakers coming along. Recently, we've just had 28 refugee families arrive from Afghanistan. They all worked for the British Army. The dads were all translators. And the army have provided them with housing. So that has, the older children do speak English, but the younger ones, 6 and 7 and under, don't. So that's been a big learning curve for us as well. So our I suppose our dynamics are changing again. But I think the thing we do best here is adapt to change. And that, I think I wrote in my wee blurb to you, Judes, that I couldn't put my finger on it when I first arrived here in October 2020, because we were just coming out of the lockdown, but about to go into the second one. And the kids here were just amazing. They were so hoped with going into bubbles, and it was like, you know, what is different here? And I think it's just because actually they have been, from the day dot, and the civilian families here have been used to things changing regularly in school. So it's a wonderful wee place. I hope to stay here till retire, unless I get anywhere else. I hope I don't. But it's really special. There's Johnny and I understand, and our close colleagues within the schools. But when I go and speak to other schools out with, you know, even within Edinburgh, but they don't get it. They will never get it. That we can have 54, I think it's 62 children have left since August. and 59 have arrived. So, you know, it's just the whole churn the whole time. But it's a really special wee place, and anyone's welcome to come and visit anytime.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yvonne. And I can second that about Collington. It's just such a lovely community, and the work of the staff. The staff are just working so hard there, and it's just a lovely place to be in. I just think it's really important to highlight the fact you were talking about relationships, and that is key. You know, if you haven't got the relationships, you haven't got the engagement. And also, I was going to ask, what's the turnaround like with transitions in and transitions out of the school? Is it quite frequent, or do you have periods where
anything from 9 months to, I would say, about 18 to 2 years seems to be the sort of norm. But you know, some families are getting to the point where they are trying to put down roots here, and then the dad will travel as unaccompanied, I think it's called. So I'm regularly asked to write sort of supportive letters to say why, especially children that have got additional needs. We have a huge number. I think the data that Graham and others pulled together showed that, you know, our armed forces do have a high percentage, or can have a high percentage of additional needs, and then that all feeds into where they are in wait lists, and then you know, they can have you know, be quite close to an appointment when they're in England, and then they arrive here. And how do you actually manage? We've talked about this before, I think, on our ADIS meeting, Graham. How do you manage to then slot them into where they deserve to be? There isn't a way. There isn't, you know. So we start. I feel for families, they're starting all over again, and diagnoses can take a while, and identifications, and usually with one identification or diagnosis comes another. So we've got kids that have got an ASD, but they're now awaiting a ADHD. It's hard. And then I think because I am quite, you know, try to build these good relationships, I honestly feel that some weeks I'm more a social worker to all our families than I am a teacher. So I'm helping with housing just now, and I'm writing letters, and families that are separated and the wife's got 12 weeks to get out the house, and you know, and I sometimes think, right, I've got to park that or involve Sean, who's the AWS who's wonderful for Dreghorn, and then get on with other stuff. Otherwise, I don't get any extra time. I think years ago, my PT said funding from the council used to be more, so we'd have a full-time teacher and then maybe a PSA, whereas that's all gone, and it's literally down to our devolved budget and me deciding how we work that. So yeah, it's very consuming, and because I really enjoy it, that part of it, I sometimes forget about data and ASIL and all these other things that are meant to do.
No, I think that's an excellent point that you're making, just about how much the role as a teacher, as an educator, has changed within the education system, and just to commend you for all the amazing work that you're doing, because it's not an easy job, so well done. But it has very much changed, hasn't it? I know we were discussing that last time I was in school, so thank you so much, Yvonne. That was wonderful. Linda, would you now like to just share your observations of strengths and support strategies that you offer as well?
Absolutely.
Way over in Helensburgh.
Yeah, way over here. I can resonate so much with many of the points that have just been made. And in some cases, we see a similar picture, but in other cases, there can be almost the flip side. So, you know, taking on board there about parent council and trying to involve armed forces families that are very much coming in mid-year or not having built relationships. What we've found here is that there's such a strong sense of community within our armed forces families that actually they make up the majority of our parent council. But with that comes what I would say is one of the challenges that I'm furiously trying to overcome, is that segregation between, dare I say, a them and us situation, whereby sometimes our parent council in previous years has been seen as a group for the armed forces wives, actually. So it's been unwritten that it's ended up like that, but actually more circumstantial, that maybe they've had a little bit more free time, for example, to be able to involve themselves in the life of the school. as a school, we try and work really, really closely with the community partners that we have, both in a forces capacity and in a kind of regular community capacity. Like we were just saying there, you know, Yvonne was saying, one of the key things that we look at when a child is transitioning is the additional support needs factor. And we had the pleasure of welcoming Graham to Kilgreen this year to talk with staff, pupils and parents about how we support our forces children to access what is required and where are the shortfalls here. And you know, the children transferring to us, like Yvonne said, they could be very much near the top of a waiting list in England or elsewhere, come to us, and we are kind of championing them to be where they should be and access what they require. They should not be hindered for a compulsory transition that really wasn't within their choice. What I would say is that locally, organisations such as our young carers, they specifically ask about the forces status of our children, to take that into consideration when sharing support, accessing support, signposting families, and I think that's really encouraging, that out with education, out with the designated forces supports, that other agencies realise the impactful factor that being part of a forces family can be. But I'm acutely aware of the fact that, you know, even within our attainment, looking at the fact that a child has made several transitions has always been a negative impact. You know, when we were sharing in the chat earlier on, many people shared about the experiences that children bring following multiple transitions. So I think working with partners to celebrate as well. So we welcome organisations such as Never Such Innocence, but when we do, they work with the whole cohort of children.
Yeah.
Because I think if we're educating the children, then that filters back to the families, you know, about the uniqueness of being part of a forces family, and moving away from always thinking of a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, what is the lovely uniqueness? When we're talking about the vision and values of a school, you think about the uniqueness. You don't consider just the negative challenge that's faced.
Yeah.
So by opening up these opportunities to all, that is kind of part of building those relationships between children and parents as well, to stop being the forces families, the civilian families, because we do see that. Similarly, when we welcome being so close to Faslane Naval Base, we are able to access some of the resources there. I've been able to take children on the base to see firsthand, you know, what is happening for families, you know, where daddies, mummies work in that environment. But also when we welcome in the teams, tomorrow we've got the Navy STEM team coming in to work with us. We've got a kind of 10-year long-standing relationship with them. But when they come in tomorrow, children will work together, and they will learn very much in line with our curriculum development here at Kilgreen. It's about skills and about deploying those skills, transferring those skills. And that might be within a forces capacity when they're older, or it might not be. But it's showing how these roles contribute to kind of the wider world. On the flip side of that, we do, as I said, sometimes come across the challenge of why do they get and we don't get, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where our focus has been, on the education of the children and filtering that back into with parents as well. We've often run family learning sessions where we welcome the parents in to learn with the children. The last time we had the Navy STEM team in, that's what we did. So we had the parents learning pneumatics, we had the parents coding, and they loved it. And they can see that factor of inclusivity. I know, like Yvonne, key is the relationship factor at Kilgreen. And without that, I'm sure everyone would agree, you get nothing. You get nothing. So like Yvonne has said, building the relationship with families and the children, so important. So welcoming them in, making sure when they arrive that we send the last couple of newsletters out, for example, making sure we signpost them to the Parent Council Facebook page, that none of us can see, but we'll let you on it. You know, so making sure that they are made to feel as part of the community as possible, because what we do find is when a family does arrive, or they very much one of the parents is often leaving straight away. We had a new family. In fact, we've had 3 new children this week alone, and one father was basically settling the child into school, and I believe he was going back to Gibraltar. So not even nearby, a car ride away, and mum knows no one in the area. Now, what I would say is that will quickly change. We're a very close-knit community. We've got 40% of our children are from forces families, and although it doesn't fluctuate the way Yvonne's numbers do, we can go between kind of mid-30s and upwards of kind of mid-40s. So the children are very used to welcoming new families, as are the parents as well. There will be friendly faces at drop-off and pick-up. I think, like Yvonne as well, we know, to the credit of all our pupils here, we also welcomed Ukrainian refugees in the last 18 months, and we also welcomed families from Afghanistan into our nursery. But due to the kind of fluidity of Cogran's role, and that the yearning that children have, it's a new friend. That's how they see it, a new friend coming. It's been lovely to see how these children have just been welcomed the same way any other child would, because it's part of the norm here. I think as well, Yvonne said, you know, working alongside charities. I think when we were supporting our forces families here at Cogran, it's important to recognise that it's not done in isolation. You know, I'm looking at Lucy here. Lucy's coming to work with us tomorrow. Bless her, she tried last week, but my diary had obviously not been updated the way it should have been. But Lucy's coming to work with us with a group of 5 to 7s. And the kind of key element for me, and the thing I like about Lucy's work, is coming from the voices of the child. They will design their project. Lucy and I have had chats about what we think it could look like, but we will be guided by the young people. And like, you know, Meg was saying as well, when you really listen to them and their views shine, they come up with far better things than we can. You know, far better things. And you wonder, was I like that when I was young? Could I think outside the box like that? It's to be absolutely commended. The last thing I want to say is, you know, with, like Yvonne was saying, you know, we are accountable. We're accountable in the inspection process. We're accountable in terms of our ASIL data. And, you know, we can't very well say, oh, we were building the relationships. I'm sorry, we're going to get to the academics.
Yeah.
But it's recognising that connection and how they work together. Yeah. We're quite proud of the data that we hold for lots of different groups of children. We have a management team of head teacher, depute, and 3 principal teachers, and they each have responsibility in departments. The principal teachers focus on the interventions that are in place within classes, be it health and wellbeing, working alongside our pupil support teacher, ASN assistants, or within literacy, numeracy, and other areas. We, for about 3 or 4 years, actually looked at the armed forces as a category, and focused on the academic achievements and looking at what the gap was. We have now been able to remove the armed forces families here, children here, as a focus category, because that gap has narrowed so much that actually looking at them with a different hat on, you know, perhaps with just the ASN sense of things, perhaps there is an additional need, or maybe they are a young carer, and that's the more impactful factor. But what we have found with some stability, we don't have the same turnover as Yvonne. We, with that stability and kind of longer placements with us, we have seen that gap narrow. And quite a number of our families now, you know, again, like Yvonne was saying, the father, it does tend to be dad, now travels for work because the children have put roots down within a school. They have made friends. They are accessing community services the way, you know, they would do, or they would have hoped to. So that's kind of what we're seeing happen more often, or we're seeing families return to us after maybe a period of 2 years away, recognising where they would like to be for various reasons. So Yeah, and I think another strength is that we've got armed forces families within the staff as well. You know,
Yeah.
so there's a kind of unique understanding from some of them, or kind of sometimes a little bit of an inside understanding as to, you know, why things might be the way they are within a community, a bit of unrest. So, yeah, you know, I've been here about 13 years now, and like Yvonne, there's an enjoyment comes from supporting our armed forces families, and when given that as part of my remit alongside, you know, the kind of ASN side of things and rights of the child, everything, it just works together. And it's something that personally I get a great amount of satisfaction out of, and get to make connections with people that put up with me, Lucy. So, and my nonsense in my diary is not up to date. So no, it's wonderful, you know, to be able to share and work together. And absolutely, I'm sitting here making notes of things that I want to take away and look at, you know, when I'm here to be sharing as well. You know, it's amazing. There's such a wealth of knowledge and skill within the community of professionals too.
Thank you so much, Linda. That was just wonderful to hear everything that's going on at Colgreen. And again, just emphasising, you know, in Scotland there are so many amazing things happening, and we really have to celebrate that. And the power of partnership is, if we all come together, it's just a wonderful thing. So that was wonderful to hear from you, Linda. Thank you so much. We're now going to go up north to Pri and Moray, and as we've heard, Pri is head of the Dandelion project. And Pri, it'd just be wonderful to share your insights about the Dandelion project and its work with schools, local partners and organisations, and how does the project address the unique circumstances these young people face. So it'd be wonderful to hear from Pri. I can just find you on my screen.
Thanks, Jude. It's been really lovely to hear from schools, so thank you for that. So I know I've got 10 minutes, but I'll try and to be a bit faster because I know we're finishing at past. So for those of you that haven't met me, my name's Pri, and I'm really pleased to be here with you today. So the Dandelion Project helps schools across Moray to support their children and young people from forces families to thrive. So it's through practical, sustainable approaches, and that's primary and secondary, supporting children and young people from reservist, regular and veteran families. It's led by Moray Council. We're in partnership with RAF Lossiemouth and 39 Engineer Regiment at Candlish Barracks, and it's kindly supported by the Armed Forces Covenant Fund Trust. A bit about me really quickly. So I'm a qualified primary teacher, senior leader by background, and I've worked across England and Scotland. I'm currently seconded to lead this project, and I'm also part of an Armed Forces family myself. So this work is particularly close to my heart. So right from the outset, I've been quite careful not to have an unconscious bias, recognising that, as it's been mentioned before today, that armed forces children and young people are not a homogenous group, so it's not assuming about their background. It's making sure that we listen and really understand their unique journeys. So at the heart of the project, there's a commitment to placing them at the centre of everything that we do. So listening to their experiences, understanding their journeys and supporting their successes. So I know I've got just a small amount of time with you today, but if you are really keen, I've put some links into the chat. So please feel free to explore those after today's session, and follow the Dandelion Project on Facebook just to keep updated with what's going on, because we're only halfway through the project. So Moray has a really distinctive footprint. So only 4 of our schools across the authority don't have an armed forces presence. And we have 2 military bases, so RAF Lossiemouth and Candlish Barracks, and we have approximately 1,600 children and young people from forces families. So we needed a strategic approach, something that could reach and support every school across Moray, not just those that are within the catchment areas for service families accommodation. So that was the real key driver for this project. It was recognising that while armed forces children bring huge strengths, resilience, adaptability, empathy, and all those things, that there are additional layers of complexity, and we need to make sure that that support is available at the right time should they need it. And it's not just relying on resilience. Our vision was simple. So it's about creating sustainability, meaningful support, but ensuring that it's fully embedded into everyday school life. So it's not just an extra and something that people forget about when those passionate people leave those positions in schools. So the key objectives at the beginning of the project, but also have evolved through the ever-changing needs. It's about having a greater understanding of armed forces life across settings, building in that in-house capacity for armed forces advocates, and what does that look like, and what could they be doing in schools, strengthening partnership work across education, military and community organisations. So eventually it's the schools that really have those strong connections, and they'll continue that legacy of support, and improving the experiences of transitions for families. And it's not just transition moving from different postings, but it's also those different changes that happen throughout forces life as well, which has been touched upon before. And one of the real highlights so far has been creating an advocate group. So this advocate network is any practitioner that works in primary or secondary schools across Moray are welcome to join, and it's just a chance to connect with each other, to stop people working in isolation, to share resources, just feedback to one another and just problem solve. But it's also a chance for me to take some views to our Armed Forces Covenant Partnership Group with key partners from housing, healthcare and education. And then there's also an Armed Forces Education subgroup for senior leaders as well. So it's not a top-down directive, it's like a two-way flow. So advocates bring pupil voices with them to meetings, and they share their views as well from what's happening in schools at that operational level. It's taking those to senior leaders and having that further discussion about SIPs, so school improvement plans, and then taking that to that wider group as well. And it means that the conversation's happening at that strategic level, but they're also grounded in real lived experiences. So it's brought forward by people that the children and families know and trust. So talking a little bit about the challenges. So we know that schools are incredibly busy places, that I know that firsthand too. So it's just really ensuring that there's simple, accessible resources that can slot easily into daily school life. And that's something that I'm hearing quite a lot. So that's why through the project I've developed a weekly school bulletin. It's called the Dandelion Drop, and it's basically just like a one-stop shop for disseminating information to anyone and everyone that's really interested in our schools in Moray. So it's updates about opportunities available, CPD, and it goes out to all schools via our council education bulletin, but it also goes directly to the mailboxes of those who have signed up to it as well. And that's just something that's in-house for us in Moray. There's also a resource hub that I've created, and that's part of the links that I've sent. So it's on our Moray Council website, and it's got lots of information for families, and eventually it's going to be made into a guide. And on the link tree that I posted, that's just kind of the up-to-date links that are current to now. So you'll see things for Month of the Military Child on there. And there's also a deployment form that I co-created with military and education partners, and it's all about helping schools to connect with families. So through any periods of change, deployments, exercises, training, or just when that serving parent will be away, it's really ensuring that families connect with the school so that the right support is available at the right time. There's opportunities for families to talk about things that have worked well before, not necessarily in Moray schools, but just anywhere else, anything that the school really should be aware of. And it's giving that chance to connect with a family should they want to talk more about it as well. But also families that maybe don't know what to say, some of the questions and the guidance on the second page kind of really support them through that journey as well. And then it's alleviating the pressure on the schools to be thinking quick on the spot when that form can be consistent across Moray. It's one form that's in circulation from the military bases as well and the council. So when we have deployment briefs, the serving person should be bringing that form back home with them as well. So responding to real need is the next thing we'll talk about. So we had a recent event called Coffee and Connect, which was really brilliant. It was a chance for schools to connect with the military bases. So I was continuously hearing from schools, we know about the Army Welfare Service, or we know about the RAF Lossiemouth Community Support Team, but we're predominantly Army or we're predominantly RAF. What does the other one do? We have some families from the other force. So it's just a chance for everyone to be in one place at the same time, to meet one another. And it's always better to have a face to the name as well. So it's all just about learning about what those services do and how the schools could impact from that. What was the importance of them knowing about them? So it was a chance for them to connect. Lots of people have been talking since then. We've got the Army Welfare Service delivering seasons of growth in some schools now, so that's just brilliant to see. And because it's gone so well, it's now going to be a biannual gathering, and the the two bases will take it in turns to host it, and it's something that educators will be invited to every year. And that's brilliant because that's that legacy after this project comes to an end. It's something that's always going to be in the calendar for both bases now. So the next thing is about raising awareness of the Armed Forces Covenant. So another strand of the work that the project's been doing is about raising this awareness, and our community CLD team have an excellent resource that they've already created, and it uses real life scenarios. It's something you can find on our website that's open to all, and so it really helps our staff to explore different circumstances and recognise that Armed Forces families are not just this single story. So it was something that Meg mentioned before about how children and young people want people to know that, you know, when they're moving hobbies or they might not have spaces for certain extracurricular activities, it's really encompassing all of that, as well as dentist places and, you know, for GPs. So all of this really links with everything that schools are already doing. So, you know, through UNCRC, it's through our GERFIC, it's through our How Good Is Our School. So it's just reminding schools that it's something that you're already doing, but just really highlighting the extra need for our Armed Forces families. So contributing to national and regional support, the project continues to support across the local area, but also nationally. So we have Murray's Armed Forces Education subgroup, and obviously that feeds into our Covenant Partnership group for our area, but also we're part of Skip Alliance's Scotland Hub, and lots of other groups as well. Stumbling my words here. I'm trying to get my words in too quickly because I've only got 10 minutes.
I know, it's amazing. It's just all the wonderful things that you've got to share. So no, sorry.
I was really fortunate to be invited to a conference in Oxfordshire, and you know, it was really great to talk about all the things that we have in Scotland and all the different network groups that we have, and people were really, really amazed. And I was really proud to say that we have such great support up here in Scotland, and so things like that is brilliant for me to share that good practice, but also to bring great ideas back to Moray as well, to bring back to our schools, to kind of plant those seeds of ideas. And if you haven't seen it already, part of Skip Alliance's case studies, we have 3 schools from Moray on there. So that's 2 primary and 1 secondary. So one's predominantly Army and one's RAF, and the other one's a mixture. So if that kind of resonates with you, definitely go and have a look there. There's lots of great practice shared in those case studies. So just to kind of finish off, because I know I'm a little bit over the 10 minutes, about kind of sustainability. So from the outset, the project's always been about building something sustainable, and that's always at the forefront of everything that the project does. It's ensuring that these children aren't just kind of like a single event or a single staff member. It's about kind of that whole school culture. So ensuring that children feel recognised, understood and supported. So throughout all these resources and training that's being created, that's at the forefront of everything, and things are kind of consulted and co-produced with that wider community. So yeah, thank you very much for listening.
No, thank you so much. I love the sound of the coffee and connect. That sounds wonderful, just to bring all different aspects of the community together, and the deployment form as well is wonderful. How in Moray are schools notified about deployment periods? Would the project help support letting schools know when certain units are on deployment? Because I know sometimes it's a case, I suppose, where there's maybe not as many Armed Forces children, they may not know that a deployment's occurring. So I really love the sound of that, the deployment form. That's great.
To quickly answer that, it's more so for like units, when units or regiments or squadrons are deploying, when there's a large deployment, that's something that we can pass on. But then if there's kind of smaller deployments, that tends to be more the family needing to get in contact with the school, and it's not really a process that we had in place prior to the project coming alive, but it's something that I actually took from Lou. So I know Lou's got a process in place, which I'm sure she'll mention in a minute, but that was good magpieing from Lou. It kind of created conversations up here in Moray about deployment and why is it important for schools to know in advance, because actually some families might not mention it to schools because there's so much else happening in that family, you know, and their mind's at home, that it might be one of the last things that they do. They might do it on the day that, you know, mum or dad's left, and the child's really upset because they're dealing with all the emotions. So it is something that we're thinking about here and how to make it sustainable.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Brilliant to hear everything that's happening up in Moray. So I'll now introduce Lou, who is our final speaker today. It's just been so wonderful to hear from everyone today. And Lou, it's just wonderful to hear everything that's happening up in Highland, still in the north of Scotland. Just a wee bit below Moray. Well, no, Murray's a bit further. Get my geography mixed up. But Lou, if you, I'd just like you to introduce yourself and talk a wee bit more about all the wonderful work that's happening in the MLG. So I'll just spotlight you just now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jude. And I think we agreed that my focus was going to be around the transitions.
Yes.
You were wanting me to sort of focus on transitions. I have to say, we are doing so much in Highland that even when you talk about talking about what we're doing to support those transitions, I'm never going to fit all of this in to 10 minutes. I'm really not, but I'm going to do my best. I also have to say that I work off a laptop, so unfortunately I'm a bit of a piece of paper person, so I will be looking at my notes. I haven't got one of those extra screens, I'm afraid, to have a look at. So my apologies about that. What I have popped in the chat is some information to some of the links, just some of the links I'm going to be talking about. So hopefully if people want to have a look at those, they can have a quick look. I think the reason why my role is called Promoting Positive Relationships Coordinator has now actually made me realise, yeah, that is the right title, because everybody on this call who has been chatting has been talking about relationships, that is foundational to the work that we do, because actually building those nurturing and trusted relationships and increasing well-being means that then we can reduce the barriers to learning, because as I think it was Meg said earlier around, it's not all about attainment, it is about well-being, it is about those nurturing relationships. And if we can get that right, the attainment, those, it does reduce barriers to learning, and we can be on it, they can then begin to thrive if we can get those foundations right. So I have the right job title. I am delighted, Promoting Positive Relationships Coordinator in Awana. So the engagement so I'm focusing in on transition, okay? So yes. The early engagement is key. We are all aware that that is incredibly difficult. So we know we need to be reaching out in order to get families to reach in. So what we are doing in Highland, just to give some examples, is things like welcome paragraphs in the school handbooks, in the websites, just reaching out, not with masses of information, but just a little fluffy, warm welcome to say, Armed Forces families, we understand some of the challenges, blah, blah, blah. But that reach out to them helps them reach in. Doing those welcome books and posters, that makes a massive difference, because some families might not want to come and identify, but if there's posters popped around the school or popped around community centres, etc., saying, are you from an Armed Forces family? We'd love to hear from you, or have a look at this website because we've got lots of information that might support you. We've found that our inquiries have actually begun to come from just that very soft drip feed approach, rather than the hard approach that they're coming in. We offer schools and early learning centres. When I say schools, please, it's early learning centres as well. We offer them a discretionary paragraph as well that they can add into various literature and blogs, etc., that they might be putting out. Just again, a little tiny drip feed. So it's not just a one-off push, it's just a constant little bits we send to schools, and they can just pop those in their newsletters, in their blogs, etc. The one thing that we did, which was a big one, actually, we got into the 3 Scots Arrivals pack, and that was that took 4 years of persuasion, but we got there, or 4 years of negotiation. So we now have in that Arrivals pack, there is, around housing, around health, etc. So there is an education section. So we have that front page with a fluffy welcome again, and reaching out to them about just not too much information, because that's just enough to finish everybody, but enough to tempt them into making contact or having a look at the website and then going. So that's how we're sort of, some of the ideas that we have around reaching out. But as far as our processes are concerned, we changed our enrolment forms because, as we know, all the different services come with their different challenges and different barriers. And so when somebody enrolls in Highland, whatever level they're at, we ask whether you're from Army, Navy, Marine, Air or RAF. We ask what that status looks like. Are you regular, reserve, or veteran family? Because that is really key and crucial information. I think we might be the only local authority now at the moment that actually is getting that, you know, real robust data, which is really helpful for us, because if we know who these kids are, it means we can get the right support to the child at the right time, if and when it is needed. And we have a better understanding if we understand what service they're from and what status the family are from within, you know, whether they're serving veteran or reserve. So that's really important. We also have a link on the enrolment form that says click here. Why do we want to know? Because we don't ask if you are a shopkeeper, we don't ask if you're a doctor, we don't ask if you're whoever. Why are we asking about that? So it takes the parent to that document so they can understand why we feel it is important. We also have an online training, which is an internal training module for our school staff and clericals. That's really key, because obviously they are often the first point of contact. So they get an understanding about what it's like being from an armed forces family, some of the challenges, but also about encouraging that empathetic understanding that, do you know what, this might have been a nightmare of a move for them, maybe slightly more unique from other people moving, that they've got a lot of other things that they are having to juggle and might be having to do it on their own. But also about how to robustly input that data that is coming from the enrolment form, so that our system, seamless system, that we've got it right on there. So when that information is being passed and moved as they move on or through the different year groups, etc., the people looking at it know that that is robust and it's right, and it also means that we're learning from the data that's there as well. It also helps us know where they are across Highland, because we have increasing dispersed families, is becoming more and more frequent. So that's also really helps us to know where they are and what the dynamics are and where they're living, etc. All of that information, the enrolment form, the online training module, etc., sits within our head teacher guidance as well. So the head teacher guidance for enrolment has all of that information. So it's not just directed to school staff and clericals, it sits within the head teacher guidance as well. So it means it's across the school that they have this knowledge, which is great. We provide some families will come in and they're not quite sure where they're going to go, or they're not quite sure what the catchment area is, and we've got information within our enrolment section that can support that. Other families, they know exactly, because they've been on the Facebook site for the wives, because that's where they all find out the information. I'm moving to Highland. Which school do I want to go to? Which street do I want to live in the patch? That's how it works. So for those families, we're meeting their needs, where we have a quick links document, sort of key access to key contacts. And in there, it's got, you know, if you want a placing request, here's the schools, year groups, all on one page, quick links, because actually some families just want that. Don't give me loads of information. I haven't got the time for that. So that's sort of a bit around our enrolment process. So it's really, I think, about us reaching out. I was going to say, actually, one of the things I haven't said is all the work that we do is underpinned as much as we can, because I have to say I have learnt so much from Forces Children Scotland. The work that we're doing is underpinned by the rights to the child, and we're learning all the time from you guys. it is also informed by our children and young people and our families, and it's guided by the Armed Forces Covenant, because obviously transition sits really, if you think about those 6 areas in scope within the Armed Forces Covenant education section, although that's 6 areas in scope, transition actually is influenced by each of those. So we're guided by that. And we can't have a website that we think, there you go, that's what we reckon is right, especially around transition, which is the key area. Our work is informed by our families, what they are asking for, what they're identifying, what the kids are saying. We have to listen to them and we have to respond to them to get it right. Maybe that's why the website is doing so well. Maybe that's why we're getting so many inquiries. Maybe that's why it's getting so many hits, because we're working with them in partnership, which I personally think is key, and building those relationships and going along and chatting. One example of that was around chatting with the wives, chatting with the families, and asking, so what are we getting right with you moving into Highland? What are we getting wrong, and what can we do to improve it? They felt
and you do that expertly at coffee mornings, Lou. I've watched you in action.
Yeah, I know. Well, I have to say, I spend a lot of time at coffee mornings.
Brilliant.
I like to get
Bacon
my
roll.
timing right for the bacon roll ones. Yeah, that's key. But actually, I have a great relationship with them all now, and they are lovely. They're almost cutting the roll open for me for arrival. But they were saying at one point, they said, do you know, but you don't work in partnership with us when we're coming in. And I said, but we do. No, you don't. We have to do everything. So I said, right, okay, let's really unpick this and let's look at this in a lot of detail. So we did, and we looked at their challenges, we looked at what their barriers were, what they needed. We then talked to children, young people, what were they saying? And then educators, what were they saying? So we built this checklist and guidance, I think it's called on the website, I can't remember. I think it's called guidance and checklist, something like that, about its transition in partnership is really at the core. So yeah, we've got the families, and this is what you need to do when you start to enroll. We've got on the other end, we've got the school. Once the families start to do this, this is what the school can then start to do. But actually, the responsibility does sit with you for that initial contact. We need that. We need that to happen. Then we can kick in. But right in the middle are the children and young people. And they also have a document called My Journey, My Voice, which is not about attainment, which is not about what level they're on or what. It's about them. It's about them being able to say, do you know what? This is how it is for me. This is where I am. And yeah, we know change isn't, change is the one inevitable thing that's going to happen. But that's really important, that they can be part of that transition process. We can't make families work with their kids or encourage their children to do this document. We can't make educators do it, but we've created a document that is there for them, that we signpost, that we try to say, do you know what? Let them be part of this journey, because that is really, really important. So that was just maybe an example of one of the things that we did around transition and working in partnership. We take all their voices, and we don't just listen and we don't just understand them. We use them with their permissions in our resources to make sure that it's a real depth of knowledge that educators or communities are getting, that they understand what these kids are saying, what the families are saying, and we put them and use them in resources to try and influence and create positive change, I suppose, in that transition, that it's a better and smoother transition for them. So I have signposted the Learning and Knowledge Hub. Yeah, there's stuff on there that I might have done a few years ago when I was first in post. Now I'm much more techie savvy. I'll be making them much more singing and dancing, some of them. But the bottom line is the information is there, and that's the key bit. So we also all this information is not just shared on the website, it's for families and educators, but we're also working with wider education and learning teams, with specialist service providers, with health and social care. That's the partnership that I lead. If you go into the website, you'll see it is a big partnership. Forces Children Scotland and all the fam feds. There's lots of people on the call today who are part of our partnership. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Because that's what gives us strength. It also gives us strength that I sit within psychological services, because I have direct links and relationships with EdPsychs, with primary mental health, with health and social care. So that's what makes it work. It's not sitting in isolation and trying to reach out. We have that partnership established. So thank you, everybody who's on the call, for being part of the MLG partnership. I love it. And you are all contribute so much to it. So lastly, in the link, I've put my rights to wellbeing. That's a program that I developed and wrote with Dr. Bernadette Cairns, who's our head of educational psychology. And that actually has really been useful around transitions, because it's around the kids being able to, it's supporting resilience. It's also being able to be included and nurtured and respected and have an understanding of each other. So I put that link in there because that is a program that there's been a lot of interest in, and please come back to me.
Well,
You know about
power
it.
of work. Power
Yeah,
of work.
no,
That's
it's
absolutely
been
fantastic.
So
Yeah.
I'll be quiet now, because the covenant bit, the amazing work, wait till you hear this one, but I'm saving that for what have you done for Military Child. So I'll now be quiet, but please come back to me. Sorry, I am so enthusiastic about the work we do in Highland. We have been cited as a good model of practice for other local authorities to follow because of the work we're doing, and this partnership works. So please get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much, Lou. Just again, wonderful just to hear just all this amazing work that is happening across Scotland. And also, I think you mentioned that the welcome book that the young children designed in Highland.
Oh, how could I? You know what? Because
I-
I'm a Blue Peter girl.
No,
Okay, so
no.
you have to. The
Yes,
link I think
yes.
I've put in there, because
Yeah.
the kids have produced amazing resources. So in things like the Three Scots Arrivals Welcome Pack, we put links to it. We put links to it in other places in the website. But this is the children and young people in primary school created an online book to they're from armed forces families, to welcome other children and young people from armed forces families and what they think is important about them moving to Highland. And they've got things like the Highland Cows and Ben Nevis, but it gives a real sense and promotes a real sense of belonging and connection prior to these kids coming. So we push that in our checklists and guidance. Sorry, it's in there as well. Sorry, we're doing so much, and there is a secondary version. And the exciting thing is that we are about to launch into doing a co-creating an early years one too. So at the moment we have primary and secondary, and I'll be quiet now.
No, it's on. It was me that that mentioned it, but I just think it's really fantastic that you raised the point, Lou, about education is not in isolation. It's working with health, and it's working with all these partners, all these organisations, and again linking into GIRFIC, everyone has a responsibility.
Absolutely.
To the child, and we legally we all
It's
have to work
holistic,
together,
isn't it?
Yeah, the holistic approach. So it was really great that you were able to emphasize that there. I am very conscious of time. I really wish we had extended the webinar to 2 hours. It's just been absolutely wonderful to hear from all our fantastic panelists today. I know we've only got a couple of minutes, but it would be wonderful if you do have any questions for any of our panelists. You are more than welcome to wave a hand, or if you've got a question that you want to pop into the chat function. I am very conscious that the webinar is due to end in a couple of minutes' time, but if you are okay to hang on for a little bit longer, that would be wonderful. But if anyone does have any questions, please wave your hands, because now's your opportunity to ask about all this. Yep. Are you?
Can I please ask one question?
Oh yeah, no.
Because, and this is hugely embarrassing. If anybody has a question for me, could they ask me now? Because I'm on list for our tennis match tonight. So I'm slightly having to go out the door, slightly prompt. And so if anybody had a question for me, please could you do me first? Is that very selfish?
No. Graham, would you like to ask the first question?
Well, it's not a question. It's a comment. And is that, and I have put something in the chat. It's just that the issue of waiting lists and transfer of armed forces children between waiting lists is a major issue, and that's what one thing that our research has shown, and colleagues tonight have referred to it. But there was really interesting statement published by the Royal College of Psychiatrists in the second week of April. BBC News covered it. And what they pointed out, which was unknown, is that the health boards are operating hidden waiting lists specifically for neurodivergent children, of whom there's a substantial group within the Armed Forces children population. So although there's this very pious commitment at national levels for people not to lose their place on the waiting list, that completely ignores the fact that for incredible numbers of children, the waiting list is actually hidden, and there is no chance of getting transferability on the waiting list. And the figures that I've published in the chat pretty well reflect that. And I'd just ask and if people have got information on this, I'd really welcome hearing about it, because if you imagine that you're on a waiting list in Hampshire, for example, and you're, say, 20th from the top of the waiting list, how would that place transfer if you move, for example, to Argyll and Bute or Fife or whatever? Because whatever system they're operating, it's not like the Tesco delicatessen counter, is it, where they give you a ticket which shows you where you are. So I suppose it's a comment and a little question, because if anybody's got any examples of effective management of waiting lists and people not losing their place, actually I'd quite be really interested in that.
Mute.
Sorry, Lou, would you like to try?
Yeah, I was just going to say is that so if I take, for example, CALMS or ENDAS, because these are generally, yes, we have with occupational health, speech and language, etc. We have other interventions as well. But as far as with ENDAS is concerned, so if a child is on the waiting list, so say they are in Highland and they are sitting on the waiting list and now, lo and behold, they're getting a posting order to head, down to England somewhere. If they can provide us with proof and evidence of the posting order, they will jump to the top of the waiting list.
And is that with you, Lou, or is that with where they're going to?
No, that's what we have in place in Highland, is it prioritizes them, because otherwise they will move. And when they are sitting on the waiting list, ENDAS and CALMS is based on critical need, and therefore depending on, but if there is a posting order in place, the system that we have in place is that if a posting order is provided as evidence, that can then be shown to the ENDAS team to go, this family's on the move again. Do you know what? They need to be, so that's the system in place.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Linda, have you got a question there?
I'm not sure whether it's further to Graham's point there. I'm not sure whether my explanation or thoughts round about it will provide any more clarity around about it. But previously, we take any support and information that we are given from the family, from the professionals in England, and share that either via the GP, via the community paediatrician, in the hope that, albeit we are not seeing the waiting list, or that's not part of what we are privy to, but certainly my hope is that with the information gathered, there can be almost like that comparative picture created as to show the step in a process that a child is at. The issue we've had within this area is the kind of lack of stability within an assessment team for any families.
Yeah.
Therefore, the waiting list, as you shared, Graham, and the figures that you put in the chat, has increased massively.
Yeah.
And albeit I would love a system like Lou's just described, where we do see a little bit of come and go is with children about to transition, but generally not to a new school or a new area, but more so to secondary.
Yeah.
That's where we do see a little bit of leeway. Where we've faced challenge, though, is where the processes are so drastically different. I'm thinking of a child that was being assessed for ADHD. The parents thought the child had been referred in England. They had gone through several steps, but actually upon transfer of information, a referral had never been completed.
Yeah.
And we were the ones to forward that, and we had to start a process again.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do think if we are all working as professionals, despite pathways in being slightly different, we can take good work that has been done and look at where that would fit in within, they've had 2 appointments, we've got this assessment data, they're at the stage of, right, let's make a decision, or we need further observation, or, and slot in that way within a regime. So, but there's lots to chat about with that one.
The one thing
Thanks,
actually
Linda.
I didn't mention, which I've also noticed, despite our system in process, don't ask me for data on it, Graham, but you could ask Bernadette when she comes along to the officers' meetings that you go to. But one of the things I have noticed an increase in is families getting in touch to say, NDAS list is so long. Can you please give me, can you give us, could you signpost us to a private one that will be recognised by your local authority to get an assessment done? And I have noticed actually, interestingly, more recently, that has increased. People going, do you know what? We'll pay the whack of money. We'll get the assessment done, and as long as it is one that can be, will be, what's the word? Highland Council will recognise. Then they're, I thought I would add that.
Oh, thanks, Lou.
That's great, thank you. Samina, have you got a question?
Just a quick, really interesting, Lou, what you're sharing with the group. I'm just interested that you're saying about posting orders as proof. How did you instigate that happening? Was that at a strategic level, or was it with the
so
trust?
It's part of I believe it's part of supporting transitions and additional support needs when you look at the Armed Forces Covenant. So when you look at the Armed Forces Covenant around additional support needs and ensuring that support and interrupted learning, and you look at all of those areas in scope, actually the Armed Forces Covenant would support that, a child is prioritised. Yes, I'm coming. It's my tennis crew. Sorry. Would support that. So actually, I think I'm quite happy to have a chat with you with this, because I'm going to have to be very
Lou, I
rude.
would really value your time, because we're Aldershot Garrison. We
Yeah.
have the other side, where they've travelled down from Catterick or whatever, and mid-assessment, and we've got, and one of your colleagues mentioned that families have been told they're in the assessment pathway, but when they then transfer, there has been no assessment. So there's no like stage where they're at. They've missed all the stages and they've got to go back to the beginning. So I think what health professionals may be saying is accurate from their perspective, but there's no document to prove for a family that you're at this stage, which was an initial discussion. Your GP put in the paperwork. It hasn't been picked up by the provider because they might be short-staffed, they might be blah, 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 and therefore it hasn't been triaged and no one's done any further action to it. So you're at this stage still.
I put my contact details in the chat.
Thank you.
Give me a shout and we can set up something.
Yes, that was super helpful. Thank you.
Has anyone got anything else for me? Because I have to, because I'm the driver for the thingy tonight.
Lou, thank you so much.
Sorry, it's really terribly rude. I'm almost as enthusiastic about tennis as I am about armed forces families. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
and all my stuff's in the chat, so get in touch with me. And thanks for letting me come along to this and just chat away about Highland. Take care.
Thank you.
Oh, there's
thank
Fiona.
You so much.
Bye.
Oh, I think we've lost Jude there. Is everyone else? We lost everyone else. Lost Jude too. Is that you back, Jude? Oh, okay. I suspect Jude is just wrapping up for us.
Yes. Nope.
I love that what we're getting is Jude's laughter and nothing else. That just sums up Jude to a T. It's beautiful. I think what Jude is saying is that the she just popped the evaluation form in the chat. We'd really love it if you could fill out the evaluation form. We have been trying to do these a little bit differently to some of our sort of more traditional CPD. So we'd really love your feedback on this. You'll see I've popped in the chat. I think we've had so much interest in this. Let's see if we can run it again in the new academic year. Jennifer will come and have a chat to you because I think in choir having something to say would be amazing. With that, we can hear from some of the other schools, and what I get a sense of, almost on the back of what Pri was talking about in terms of that group of advocates in Moray, it almost feels like there's something here for us across Scotland. How do we create a little bit of a forum? And I know Graham Carolyn does a bit of that with head teachers, but this is obviously a wider group again, so we might have a look at. So even if you think that would be a value, pop that in the evaluation form so we can know that.